This video has been made with the main intent being to provide a summary of the trial of Aaron Ybarra, highlighting key moments and points of interest throughout the days of testimony. The narrative of the video does not reflect my own opinion, and I will reserve my personal thoughts and comments for the ending summary. Sources for information gathered from articles and research papers will be linked in the description below. Viewer discretion is highly advised. Aaron Ybarra grew up in the northern Seattle suburb called Mount Lake Terrace, and was the middle child of two other siblings, an older sister and a younger brother. Aaron's father, Ambrose, had a history of alcoholism and depression, and had been battling these long before Aaron was ever born. Although his father would struggle mentally, financially, and legally, Aaron's early life was said to have been trouble-free, with no reports of abuse, neglect, or mistreatment by his parents or anyone close to him. The young boy was known to be a happy and expressive child, although this did not last forever. By the age of 7, his mother claims that she noticed developmental problems with her son. He was diagnosed with static encephalopathy, a type of permanent brain damage which is known to cause problems related to speech, attention, hearing, and vision, all of which Aaron was displaying signs of. As he grew older, people would notice that he had become more withdrawn, displayed limited facial expressions, would have difficulty expressing himself emotionally, and would generally respond to people in a way that seemed as though he didn't understand what was going on around him. Both his brother and sister would outperform him in a number of ways. One of note being that his sister was a high academic achiever, academics being a part of Aaron's life that he greatly struggled with, but not through lack of trying. Aaron would go on to be diagnosed with severe OCD, and his mother recalls multiple instances where his obsessive behavior would be most noticeable. She says that, quote, he had become obsessed with buying CDs, and would have hundreds of them unopened in his room. He wouldn't even listen to them, he'd just buy them, end quote. In one instance, his parents decided that it was time for Aaron to stop sleeping in a bunk bed, as his brother Joel no longer lived with them. One day when Aaron was not home, his mother Janice puts his bunk bed up for sale on Craigslist. A buyer picks it up that very day, and then they give Aaron a new twin bed. When Aaron gets home, he is incredibly upset, demanding that they get the old one back for him. His mother says that these demands go on for months. He was unable to let it go. Eventually, his desperate parents do try to get the original bed back, but unfortunately, the old buyer is unable to be contacted. The bed is gone forever. Aaron has said in multiple instances that this moment was the start of his hatred and bad feelings towards the world, a point in his life where his obsessive tendencies would shift from positive things to negative. When he and his brother Joel had gotten a little older, they both got a job at a local shooting range, and both boys would enjoy clay shooting, eventually leading them to enter into competitions. Joel became highly skilled at this, and went on to achieve many accolades. His parents would purchase him expensive gear, and he travelled around whilst Aaron watched his younger brother achieve from the sidelines. As Aaron reaches his early 20s, he begins to drink alcohol with his father, and they would frequent many bars together. This would be the start of Aaron's battle with alcoholism. Already struggling with depression and anxiety, around this time, in his own words, Aaron would say that the feeling of being out of control became more and more intense for him. Depression, rage, and hatred were things that he felt on a daily basis, as he centered his life around working part-time at the shooting range and drinking with either his father or a circle of friends at bars.
Up until around age 18, how was he at school in terms of his interaction with you or the teachers or the other students?
He was good. He was happy. He was liked to go to classes and liked to go be around people. He got his driver's license at 17, so he was getting a little independence from me. People liked him. Teachers liked him. Like social, real social and outgoing, and he seemed happy, even if he was behind. Either didn't seem to care or didn't know. I think he knew, but he didn't outwardly express that it bothered him.
After he's an adult, he's moving into his 20s, throughout his 20s.
Yes.
Did that remain the same?
Well, no. He started drinking later, so it changed. He was working at the range. He did get to a point in his job where he was getting older, so he wanted to move out. He wanted to earn more money and be able to move out. That was a good goal for him. So he found a temporary agency and found some work through them. He got a job as a, they call it picker-packer. I found out later that's the term, picker-packer. And he got that, and he was working full-time. And then he wasn't fast enough at picker-packer, and they let him go right away.
Did you find paperwork related to job applications that Aaron had done?
There must be a couple dozen that were in his room. Yeah, it.
Can you take a break?
It was heartbreaking to see that attempt.
As life so often does, his would become increasingly more and more chaotic as he moved towards his mid-20s.
There was several years where it went the other way, the other direction.
Let's talk about some of the things that were very difficult during that time period. Can we start with Joel? What happened with Joel?
It was in early 2010, and we had the bombshell that Joel was addicted to heroin. He had been using heroin. One of the cousins told us at a family party, and we had no idea. He was had been using heroin. By Christmas, just before Christmas, Ambrose had another DUI and he went to jail.
How long did Ambrose go to jail for?
He was for 14 months. He was gone. All of 2011 he was gone.
With his father in jail, his brother addicted to heroin, and he circling the drain of alcoholism, his mother not knowing how to handle this situation alone, was doing her best to hold everything together. Joel would be sent to a treatment facility, and when he returned, his mother, believing him to have recovered, is now ready to move past this dark chapter of their lives. Joel brings home a friend one day, and says that his friend needs a place to live, and Janice allows the boy to live rent-free in their garage. But after some time, it becomes apparent that the two boys are using heroin together. The friend, whose name is Duran, was discovered to have stolen multiple belongings from the household, including computers, jewelry, and 11 expensive guns. Aaron claims that he develops a deep hatred for this thief who stole from his family, and with this hatred, to make matters even more complicated, amongst all of the chaos, Aaron says that he has begun to hear voices in his mind, one in particular being of Eric Harris, a school shooter. Aaron deteriorates more and more as he battles these demons. His hallucinations intensify along with his alcoholism. Feelings of hatred for the world are all that he experiences, and many people that he speaks to are concerned about the things that he says. On more than one occasion, he tells people about his homicidal ideations and dreams of shooting up schools. He is involuntarily committed to a mental hospital after calling 911 and expressing that he was both suicidal and had been having homicidal thoughts. After his release from the hospital, a year later in 2012, he is again committed to a mental hospital when a person found him drunk in the street, laying down and rambling that he wanted to have an engagement with SWAT that would end in his death. Amongst his rambles that night, he also stated that no one cared for him and his life was worthless. After this incident, he is diagnosed with transient psychosis, and prescribed antidepressants and antipsychotics. Once again, he is released from the hospital. Initially, reports say that the medication does improve his condition. He stops drinking after a week-long episode in detox, and his friends describe him as being the friend that they loved. Quiet, but very funny, pleasant, and loyal. And he was going back to doing hobbies, such as writing science fiction and fantasy screenplays. During this period of calm, in August of 2013, his father, after being released from prison, would get drunk in their household one night and attempt to slit his own neck with a knife. Aaron finds his father bleeding from the throat and calls his sister in a panic. She then calls 911. Ambrose survives this event, but it is said to have scarred Aaron deeply. It is also unclear if the two are related, but around this time, Aaron decides that he does not want to feel calm and patient anymore, and that he wants to feel the hate within him. He claims that the medication he had been taking has been suppressing his motivation to carry out his plan for a shooting, and that he had begun to feel compelled to execute this plan once more. As a result of this, Aaron stops taking his medications and begins to focus on shootings once again. The voices come back, and he begins to drink heavily to not only quieten them, as he says he no longer would hear the voices when he blacks out, but that being drunk would calm the paranoia that came with making a violent plan such as the one he was working on. Aaron is blacking out almost every night from alcohol consumption, and he obsessively researches tragic shootings, telling his friends that he is doing this because he's writing a screenplay and is using these events as learning material. This now becomes the main focus of his life, claiming that when he hears the voice of Eric Harris, it is demanding that he carry out a shooting. Aaron decides to investigate the Seattle Pacific University to see if it would be an adequate location to conduct an attack. He has no ties with this university. He knows no one there, and says that he chose this school out of convenience, as it's about a 30-minute drive from his house. It's May 19th, 2014, and Aaron goes to SPU under the guise of an exchange student looking at attending this uni. Once he gets there, he enters the main building and talks to one of the educational staff.
What I remember is he came in just like a normal student would come in. He came in just by himself, and he just asked normal questions that any person would want to ask about where our place is at, what are normal class times, where are the areas to go, and so I just gave him basic information. He asked for some generic scholarship and other information about the school, just questions that were asked me almost 100 times a day when I would get emails or phone calls from parents and just others requesting information about the university. He wanted to know our class size, and he wanted to know if we were on the quarter or semester system. He seemed to respond just like any other person that had come into the office requesting information, just normal conversation, and then sent him on his way after answered all his questions, and he just wanted a tour, so I just sent him off with this packet and the map for walking around.
I initiated conversations saying, do you need help? How can I help you? He in turn said, I'm a prospective student and I would like a tour of the campus. So I asked him questions about his life, what had brought him to SPU.
What did he say?
From my recollection, he said along the lines of that he was going to Everett Community College, that he wanted to attend a bigger university, but not as big as UW, but a small university.
When you were talking to him, did you have any trouble understanding what he was saying?
No.
Did he appear to be understanding what you were saying to him?
Yes.
Was there anything about the way that he was acting that struck you as unusual?
No, no more unusual than you would find in an average person.
Okay.
At the end of it, I remember concluding it in front of the music building, and because the music building is very close to my dorm, and then sending them off to the student union building, because that's primarily where you ask people for tours, or at least that was my impression, is where you ask people for tours or just questions about the campus. So I sent them towards the student union building, and then I departed to my dorm.
He asked me to show him a building or asked to see something, and then we talked and walked around. It's a small campus, so I showed him the main buildings, I would say. I believe I showed him my school, the education school, and we walked into the business school, McKenna, because I believe he said he was thinking about being a business major. He seemed very happy and a little excited to be there, but very normal and very nice, and very thankful that I showed him around.
Was he polite?
Yes. He offered to buy me coffee, and he just seemed very grateful that I showed him around, but everything else seemed like I was just showing him around.
Around 2 weeks after he visits the school, on June 4th, CCTV footage captures Aaron driving around the campus. He claims that he was making sure that at this time of the day, there were a lot of people in the Student Union building, the spot that he plans to attack. The next day at around 3 p.m, Aaron grabs his shotgun and a large amount of ammunition, then drives towards the school. He goes to the back of the university, in the north side car park, and parks his vehicle right near to where some students are performing a physics experiment. He steps out of the vehicle and walks to the back door of the building. This door requires a key card to access, something that he hadn't anticipated, and after he realizes that he won't be able to get in this way, he goes back to the truck, drives away, and parks in the street in front of the university, grabbing his shotgun and about 75 shells, which he stuffs into his jacket pocket. He calmly walks towards the main entrance.
I saw him walk up towards a group of people on the sidewalk who are not facing him, and with the rifle in shooting position, and I was wondering to myself, could this be a joke? What is going on here? It was pointed at the back of the head of the person who was not facing him, who was in conversation with 2 other people on the sidewalk.
And I saw that gentleman at the edge of the eastern car line, crossing the street in front of us, no more than 20 or 30 yards away. He had a shotgun, probably looked like a Beretta shotgun or something over and under, whatever. He brought the gun up to his shoulder about midway into the street and proceeded to walk across the street. We heard that I heard the shots from the shotgun, and just happened to, there were 2 people who were standing in the building on the west side of the street, and one of them fell to the ground.
We were standing outside of the front doors of Otto Miller Hall. We were talking about the following year's school classes and what teachers to take or what teachers not to take. And from across the street, we saw someone walking down across the street, and he was pointing something at us, and he told us to get inside. When I looked at him, it looked like he was pointing it at me, or both of us.
You and Thomas?
Yeah.
He proceeded to walk towards Sophie and I, and at that point I noticed him. He got closer and closer to us, and that's when Paul Lee got in between. Paul Lee got between myself and the suspect, and at that point, that's when the suspect got into firing position. It
didn't really register. First, I had never been in that situation. I was like, okay, that's weird. I thought it was a joke. I thought he was telling us to get inside because we were skipping class. I thought he knew Thomas. And it was headed towards the end of this year when all the seniors had their big projects out, and so it was not uncommon to have big metal devices being carried around, so I didn't really think anything of it. I kind of laughed, and then I turned back to Thomas and started talking again.
And Paul Lee turned around, and that's when he pulled the trigger.
I heard a bang, really, really big bang. I saw Paul fall onto the ground, and he was shot in the face. He was close enough to where I could feel like a rush of air falling when he fell down. He was very close.
How did he fall? How did he land on the pavement?
He had his backpack on, and he fell onto the pavement. His right side of his face was on the ground, and he had his arms by his sides and straight down.
Could you tell if he'd been injured?
Yes.
How could you tell that?
because half of his head wasn't there.
Did you at that moment, when you heard the shot and saw Paul fall, were you aware that you had been injured at all?
I was not aware.
Were you bleeding?
Yes, I was.
From where?
From my neck, my chest, and my face.
I looked back up at him, and he had the gun pointed, and I was standing pretty in between Thomas and the man, and he had the gun pointed at me. I could see the barrel, and I could see it. It looked really close to me.
So you actually were able to look down the barrel? Is
Yeah.
that correct?
Yes. I heard a click, and then the gun went down, and it looked like he was manipulating it somehow.
I also thought it was a joke or some kind of like a theater play thing going on. But then as soon as we saw the blood and it was just too graphic, we realized that it wasn't a kid. It looked like he was shot in the head on the right side, and there's a lot of blood, and part of his brain started opening up. Thomas had blood splattered all over him, and he was just looking right at the shooter. Sophie was the first to react, so she starts running, and then Thomas starts running. So I realized that the best thing to do is run, so I ran.
The weapon doesn't fire as Aaron intended it to, and while he is figuring out what happened, Thomas and Sophie run, alerting people as they do that there is an active shooter. With 19-year-old Paul Lee dying on the ground, the panic sets in, and a number of students, including Thomas and Sophie, all take refuge in a university engineering machine shop. Chaos quickly spreads as many terrified people desperately call 911.
We just witnessed a shooting on 3rd Avenue and Nickerson.
3rd and Nickerson? How many minutes ago was this?
30 seconds
Was it
ago.
3rd Avenue North or 3rd Avenue West? 911, what do you report? Hello? Hello? This is 911.
Hello?
Hi, this is the police.
At the office at the university, there's a man with a gun and he has shot a child in the head.
Can you tell me where they're at?
Who? Somebody died? Just walked up behind this guy. Where somebody died. 911, what are you reporting? Oh, there is a shooter in Otto Miller. SPU. There was a shooter on campus at Otto Miller.
911, bring an emergency.
South Pacific University. Okay, what is going on at South Pacific? 911,
What are you reporting? Hi, I'm at Seattle Pacific University. Yep. There reports that there's someone with a gun who shot someone on campus. I didn't see that. Did you see who did the shooting?
for the school is, right?
Okay. What's your phone number?
Amongst all of this panic, Aaron calmly makes his way towards the entrance of the university building.
The thing that struck me the most was his calm demeanor. His face was very unemotional. He wasn't like looking around or frantic, or he wasn't even walking quickly towards Otto Miller. He was just kind of slowly, unemotionally, nonchalantly walking towards Otto Miller with a massive gun in his hand. So that was the thing that was most striking to me, was the lack of emotion that I saw.
You would expect in that situation somebody to be like, you feel chaos, you feel like energy, and he was just so calm. And so that's where it was just kind of seemed like that.
Not showing anger?
Yes, not showing anger.
Not showing sadness?
No, just a focus.
Not showing excitement?
No.
Yes,
just a focus, yeah.
Thank you.
There was a man standing right inside the last doors, so he was standing in the lobby, and he was holding something, a gun. He started to talk.
And what did he say?
He told everybody to stay calm, but that he had just shot someone outside. That's when I realized it wasn't, that it was real.
As I was going down the stairs, I saw someone to my left sitting at a table and another man standing next to him. And then when I got to the end of the stairs, I realized that person had a gun, and he was pointing it at the boy sitting down at the table. The shooter turned towards me, pointed the gun at me, and fired it.
I wasn't paying attention to what was happening around me until I heard the shotgun. I looked up and I saw Aaron Ybarra, and he was pointing at the girl. I just looked at the girl's face, and she was shocked. She took her arms to her chest. After that, I looked at the other guy next to me. It wasn't next to me, it was just on my right. And he stood up and ran towards the hallway. So I did the same after.
It felt really hot, and like a kind of like a surge of energy just pushed my body backwards. At that moment, I still didn't fully realize what had happened, so I was kind of confused still. And noticed that I couldn't feel my right arm, and I couldn't move it. And then I felt that my shirt was wet, and I was covered in blood at that point. He looked just regular. He looked a little frightened, maybe a little worried.
What do you mean, like, he looks worried, he looked frightened?
Just his facial expression wasn't very distinct. He looked more like worried or kind of scared, just very unassuming, I guess. I kind of backed up and went behind the staircase, and I got my phone out of my pocket and tried to call for help, but I couldn't work my phone because I was shaking too hard. I saw a girl come out of the hallway directly in front of me, and she yelled and asked if I needed help, and I said yes.
We tried to walk back towards the hallway that I had come out of, and we did not make it very far before she collapsed down the wall and onto the floor, which is where I applied pressure to her wound and tried to keep her conscious and talking to me. She did keep saying, "I thought it was a joke." That was something she repeated many, many times.
Hannah told me to just kneel down and get Sarah's head on my lap to presumably ease breathing, and Hannah was focusing on calming down Sarah, who was distressed. She was quite confident that she was going to die.
I think there was a boy, I don't remember speaking to him, but he was near my feet in the hallway. I told her to call my Aunt Vickery and my mother. I believe Hannah told her what happened, and then she handed the phone to me, and I kind of just told my mom, that I was fine, and I just told her that I loved her and everything.
Barely half a minute before Sarah was shot in the chest, as Aaron entered the building, he drew the attention of John Mayes.
I was on my computer and I had headphones on. I noticed someone going through the door. I didn't think anything of it. And then I heard someone say, "Nobody move," in a fairly loud voice, and that caught my attention. And I looked out and saw a man holding a shotgun. So he had a shotgun aimed and kind of sweeping it back and forth throughout that room at the different students, threatening them. I didn't really know exactly what to do. I knew that he couldn't see me, so I didn't want to make anything sudden happen. And then while I was kind of standing there in shock, trying to figure out what to do, I heard a gun go off, looked up, saw students running away from that area down the hallways, and then I saw the shooter with his shotgun broken open, trying to reload. So I took pepper spray that I had in my backpack. I went out the door of my little office room, sprayed him in the face with it twice, and grappled a little bit. I think that he definitely tried to hold on to it, but I didn't have too much difficulty. I took the shotgun and put it back in that office room. And then I was kind of staying in there, figuring out what to do. I saw him crouched down. It looked like he was pulling something out. I thought it was probably a pistol or something. So I went and grabbed him from behind. And then it turned out he had a knife that fell to the ground. And I just held him there. And then another student came, and I yelled at him to get the knife away. He threw the knife several feet away and helped me hold him down.
I put my knees onto his legs and started patting him down because didn't know if he had anything else. So patted him down. He had a knife on him. Pulled the knife out. Pulled a bunch of shotgun shells out of his pockets.
What made you think to do that?
I've probably seen it on TV, but he said you should let me have kept my knife so I can slit my own throat.
And did you say anything to that?
I told him to stop being a pussy.
Did he have any reaction to that?
No.
Was he resisting at all at this point?
A little bit, but not very much.
Okay. And how was John doing at this point?
He was pretty stressed. He was pretty pale. Like I said, prior to that, I really didn't know John, but he was like as white as a sheet of paper. Pretty stressed out. I kind of looked at him and I was like, "Hey, maybe we'll get out of finals." And he didn't really laugh at that. That's what I'm saying. I could hear a woman yelling in the background. What sounded as she'd been injured or shot.
The shotgun shell went through my right chest and came out the back of my right arm, and it kind of pierced and went through an artery, my brachial artery right in my shoulder. So that's what caused all the bleeding, I guess. And then the pellets in the shotgun shell punctured my right lung and caused it to collapse. I remember like police officers or like SWAT team people running down the hallway. They were jumping over me.
Well, securing a scene is a very, like, so the bigger the facility, the longer it takes to secure it. Securing the scene is just making sure that every room, every closet, every nook and cranny of that facility has been cleared, checked, and rendered safe, being that there's no other threats in that facility. We got there in the midst of the officers kind of first getting there and figuring out what they had, and a lot of these things are chaotic. You're getting lots of different information from the call takers, who are also getting different information from people calling 911. So the dispatchers are getting out as much as they can, but it's always a very chaotic scene of not sure what you have yet. So the officers were getting there and kind of feeling what they might be having at the school at that time. SWAT officers who get there are going to launch into the building to go support patrol and get that foothold or get that initial perimeter or secure space that we can start to work in and kind of again figuring out what we have and getting a lay of the land.
First thing I asked them, was the person injured? They said no, this is the shooter. So Officer Bed was with me, and I said, this is a suspect. I told the male to put his arms out like an airplane.
And what did he do?
He put his arms out like an airplane. And at that point, I controlled his left arm, while Officer Bed controlled his right arm. And then we, together, simultaneously put his hands behind his back and then handcuffed him. I asked him if he had any weapons on him. He said he did not. All he had was a shotgun. Then I asked him if he was by himself or if there was another shooter. He said he was by himself. At one point, he said that he wanted to die and that it was a compulsion.
Once we got back to the homicide offices, the homicide detective offices, we took him upstairs to a restroom, let him wash his face, get that pepper spray out as best we could. He mentioned that he was surprised that we were treating him nicely. I think he said he expected us to beat him or kick his ass, I think was the phrase he used. But he thanked us. He mentioned that there was a journal in the truck that contained information about his plans for the shooting. So we put him in the room and turned him over to the detectives there.
I've been doing this for 28 years. I've been a homicide detective for 12. You kind of want to get a base feeling of where this person's mental state is. So, I mean, I always start an interview before, I just don't walk in there and like, tell me you did this. That's TV. In real life, we don't interrogate, we interview someone. And I walked in there and I sat down, introduced myself. I got some of his basic personal information as far as who his mother was, who his father was, what were their phone numbers, what is your address, what is your phone number, things of that nature. And he answered all those questions without any issue. The only thing was he couldn't open his eyes very well.
And did he ever appear to be hallucinating or responding to internal stimuli?
No, he wasn't.
During the course of your time with him, did he ever ask you if the shooting really happened or say it was like a dream that you recall?
No, my understanding was he understood that the shooting occurred.
I mean, how long have you had these feelings?
The evil feelings or the good ones?
Both.
Since I was 13, the good feelings, until 23 when my stuff got taken away. My bedroom furniture got taken away.
So in the last 3 years, you've started having these bad feelings?
Yeah.
And can you describe the bad feelings to me?
I just felt nothing but hate, 100% hatred towards the world, towards everyone. I threatened to massacre the local bar once because I just wanted everything and everyone to die, and then Columbine came to mind. I don't know how, but it just hit me. When I was watching the news when I was a kid, Columbine, like Eric Harris just came into my head. These dark feelings made me go from Christianity to admiring sadism. And that's when the hate started feeling really good, because I felt that God betrayed me.
You mean today, the first guy you shot at?
First guy I shot at. I was so pissed at him because he didn't take me seriously. I hate it when people disrespect me. But right. I can't let out I'm incapable of letting out my true feelings. I was able to get respect once I made that first shot. I was trying to hold 2 people hostage just to have a little fun.
Right.
But they didn't take me seriously. They were laughing at me.
Did you show them the shotgun?
Yeah, I said, hey, you two get inside. There's one girl and one guy. They were talking to each other. Like they were just standing there laughing at me.
Okay.
And then I pointed to that one guy that I shot, and I said, hey you, hey you, get inside. And he said, haha, you think you can scare me with that thing? And that's when I got mad, and I was going to shoot people anyway, but I was really mad at him for doing that.
Okay. Was that the first guy you shot?
That was the first guy I shot. When he turned his back, I started walking. I put one in his shoulder. I think it was his shoulder. I didn't see any blood, but I saw him go down. They gave me no choice. I had no choice but to shoot at him to get him to kill me. Main priority was to die, but I had to pay the price somehow.
Right.
I felt I don't know, feeling that hateful power. Just when I heard the SWAT team was there, it just made me feel good. But that was me feeling my hate.
Well, what if you ran into the SWAT team guys?
Well, if I had to, I've been wanting to die, so they gave me no choice. I have no choice but to shoot at them to get them to kill me. I've been trying to warn people, no matter how hard I try, I can't stop. I can't control who I am.
Aaron is charged with the first-degree murder of Paul Lee. Then 2 years following his arrest, he goes to trial. In court, it is not argued whether Aaron did the shootings or not, but what is being questioned is his sanity at the time of the attack. His defense team would argue that he was not only unaware of what had happened, believing it to be a dream, and to really solidify the insanity defense, Aaron says that he was hearing the voice of God who was guiding him to commit this crime. He claims that God had devised a plan for him alongside the devil, and that they were the ones who had constructed this entire scenario for him. A bold claim to make, seeing as he never once mentioned God's secret plan to anyone, not in his journal where he described why he was going to carry out the shootings, and not to a number of psychologists who evaluated him many times, both before and after his arrest. I'll read to you now a few excerpts from his journal. God betrayed them, like he betrayed me. Sometime by the end of this week, or the beginning of next week, I will express how I really feel about humanity, America, and the world itself. 2.5 years in psychotherapy, and 2 years in psychiatry, and didn't help. I had a high level of stress that made me a little crazy and not myself. Ever since I took the medication, I became more calm, more patient, and more confident. If my routines, my belongings, and if my life was respected, I wouldn't be so goddamn miserable. I was diagnosed with OCD, but I know that it's at a higher level than people think. If my family wanted me to go to therapy, then they should have worked with me on it instead of trying to force me to go. That caused me depression and problems. I gave therapy a shot, but the biggest reason that I went was to get everyone off my back. Therapy, counseling, and help are the 3 words I hate the most. If I have time, I will try to get my revenge on some of the guys I hate. The shit talkers at the getaway. The first one will be in the cowboy hat. That cowardly, ungrateful son of a whore. You don't run your mouth about me and try to make me look bad when I did nothing to you. If I get a chance, I will poison your beer when you and the others are not looking. I love my friends. I love being there for them, and we have such great times together. Except my life is now coming to an end. I like my co-workers and bosses and customers. I like talking to at the gun range, LA Fitness and Fred Meyer, also including Kemper. I like my bar friends and the girls at coffee shops and espresso stands. I love my family, and I understand that they want to understand now. But they should have been there for me when I needed them at the time. My friends, my family, and the others. I'd hate to do this to them, but it must be done. This is it. I can't believe I'm finally doing this. So exciting, I'm jumpy. Since Virginia Tech and Columbine, I've been thinking about these a lot. I just want people to die, and I'm gonna die with them. I'm not asking for forgiveness, because there won't be any, but it is what it is. I'm doing some people a favor by sending them to heaven, but those who are sinners like me, I'll see you in hell. In an always risky move, the defense places Aaron on the stand to testify in his own trial.
Mr. Ybarra, you raise your right hand. You swear or affirm to tell the truth? Yes, sir. Please be seated here.
Mr. Ybarra, are you currently being held in the King County Jail?
Yes.
What are you being held for?
For shooting Paul Lee and Sarah Williams.
Do you remember shooting Paul Lee and Sarah Williams?
Yes.
Do you know that that's a real thing that happened?
Yes, I do now.
Have you always known that it was a real thing?
Not at the time of the of that day.
When did you learn or realize that it was a real thing?
When I was in back of the police car and I asked the cops if the situation was real or if I was dreaming, and they told me this was a real thing and I did shoot real people. I had dreams in my sleep doing shootings, but I realized that they were just dreams. I thought they were real at first. I was hearing Eric Harris's voice, but before that, I felt God talking to me saying something to me in my heart, that I've been sinning and I'm cut off from heaven and I'm set to go to hell, so he's gonna have Satan control the destructive parts. I have to do destruction in order to go to hell. I felt that some people understood that people should be more careful, and people need to keep their eyes open.
Mm-hmm.
And also
for guns?
For anything in the situation,
okay.
Not just guns.
So Paulie should have been keeping his eyes open when he was walking down that sidewalk.
Yeah, he should have thought about what was going on instead of thinking, oh, I can get through this, nothing's going to happen to me.
Okay.
I wouldn't have shot him if he even cooperated. It was just getting through that lobby, but there was something about him that...
It was disrespectful.
Yes.
He was treating you like a joke.
Yes.
Okay.
I never had the thought of going around shooting people because I wanted to, because I had hateful feelings. Usually when I have hateful feelings, I go talk to somebody, but I was out of control feeling something that I couldn't feel before, and then...
But let's be clear, because throughout this whole thing, you've made clear that this was an expression of your hatred against the world.
Yeah, and that was Satan Lucifer's side of getting this thing done.
Got it.
And messing with me.
Right. So when you talked about how good it felt to shoot at Paul Lee, how much fun it was, do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember saying that.
Okay. I know you did a lot of research on Eric Harris. Did you do research on Alyssa Bustamante as well?
I did some. Have you heard of the story about Alyssa Bustamante, the girl who killed her 9-year-old neighbor?
Yeah.
It's kind of like what she said. You're like, I can't believe I'm doing this, but once you do it, you're like, oh my God, it's so fun.
Right.
So what was it about it that was fun, Mr. Ybarra?
Well, it wasn't really fun. It's just that I succeeded in actually something to go to hell for. But that was just a random feeling.
Okay. That's not what you told Detective Cooper, though, right?
I know, because the chemicals was messing me up.
Oh, the pepper spray was making it hard for you to tell the truth?
Yes.
Okay. Once you were in the jail, though, people there knew what you had done, right, when you got there, and you were impressed. Did you expect that?
Not when I first got in.
Okay. Did that go on for a long time? Does it still go on?
It went on for a few months, yeah.
Okay. And how did that make you feel?
I was still shocked that I was getting all that attention.
Okay. But did it feel pretty good?
How are the other inmates treating you over there? Oh, everybody is really cool. Everybody is pretty supportive. My next door neighbor, Kenya, he's hella cool. I'm glad, because I didn't know if people were like trying to be all hard and everything in there, you know? Yeah, that's what I thought too, but it's actually funny because I didn't expect this, but like since I'm the big guy on the news, some of the inmates get excited to talk to me. Since I'm the big guy on the news, some of the inmates get excited to talk to me. Oh, really? Yeah. Oh, yeah, I saw you on TV. Whoa, man, whoa, that was you that did that and stuff like that. Yeah, you know what, maybe you got a lot of respect in there, you know? Yeah. I don't know. I'm really well respected here.
So the jail is one place where you did get respect for what you'd done, right?
For being high profile, yeah.
When you talked to Detective Cooper, you made pretty clear that the reason you felt the urgency to do this was because it was getting too exciting, and that if you didn't get it done that week, then finals were going to happen, and you'd have to wait the whole summer before you'd be able to do it. Is that right?
If I waited over the summer, I was going to snap.
And what would have happened if you'd snapped? What would you have done?
Anything. I don't know what.
Would you just have committed suicide without taking anybody with you?
I don't know.
Okay.
Something crazy.
Right. The last thing I want to ask you about is that you said the hate that you felt was towards your life, not the world in general.
Yes.
That's the complete opposite of what you told Detective Cooper repeatedly, that you hated the world.
Yeah, like I said, the chemicals of the pepper spray was throwing off my thinking.
Okay, so the pepper spray made you say that.
Yeah. it was making me feel weird.
Okay. No further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Ybarra, you can step down.
In addition to blaming a lot of the things he said in his police interview on the chemicals in the pepper spray, Aaron places a large emphasis on God's message and the secret of God's plan. He explains that he never mentioned the plan to anyone before this, as God had told him not to. He says that if anyone were to find out about the plan, it wouldn't have come to fruition, and this would have been a problem. He is questioned during cross-examination about why did he keep the plan a secret then, even after he had committed the shooting. And Aaron answers that it was because the plan was still happening after he went to prison. It was all a part of the plan that he was supposed to die, and so after going to prison, he still needed to find a way to accomplish this. He claims that he does not believe the plan is still in effect anymore. Therefore, he is comfortable talking about it now on the stand. After hearing from two expert witnesses in the field of psychology for both the defense and the prosecution, each of which had vastly differing evaluations of Aaron's mental state, the jury comes to a decision.
The jury has decided as follows. We, the jury, find the defendant Aaron Ybarra guilty of the crime of murder in the first degree as charged in count 1, and it's signed and dated by the presiding jury. Verdict form 1B is blank.
Aaron Ybarra will spend the rest of his life behind bars, being sentenced to 112 years for his crimes. At this point of the video, I would like to make note that I have moved away from research and now speak my own thoughts, opinions, and feelings about this case. This is another one of those cases of tragedy layered upon tragedy, a perfect storm that brings together a set of volatile variables which allowed for this person to carry out one of the most heinous forms of violence, opening fire on unsuspecting and innocent civilians whilst they attend a facility designed to mold and set their futures with success. As you may have heard me say before in other videos, there's an innocent version of Aaron Ybarra who is lost to time, a person that once existed and had not yet committed any violent crimes. That person who no longer exists, I do feel sympathy for. Life for that version of Aaron must have been a confusing blur of emotion that he couldn't express, mixed with questions that he did not understand. His intense OCD, frustrating those around him, combined with learning difficulties, would have seen him constantly in the shadows of his siblings and peers. It seems as though the man turned towards alcohol and partying as a simple solution to an impossible problem. Compound all of this with the troubles that his family went through, and it's a pressure cooker for tragedy. The entire defense surrounding God's secret plan is one that definitely raised my eyebrow. I'm not going to get into the finer details of whether I think this was a reality for him or not, but a thought that I did ponder for quite some time was the way that he described God's plan when compared to the way that he talks about his OCD. In regards to his OCD, he would say that it had requirements, and these needed to be fulfilled. If these requirements were not met, then it would feel like bad things were going to happen. Now compare that to the way he talks about God's plan, and he would say that God spoke to him in his heart, that if he didn't complete the plan, then he felt as though he was going to snap. And when asked, why didn't he just give the plan up? His answer would be, quote, "When God asks you to do something, you have to do it." End quote. None of that is intended to try and excuse what he did though. Nothing could ever excuse it in my opinion. So when I leave the realm of wondering what drove his actions, it now leaves me thinking about some of the more external factors of his life, and the many what-ifs that could have been, should things have panned out differently for this man. What I think about the most regarding this is, in my opinion, how there is not a clear-cut failure of the system or people around him. Sure, both of these elements in his life did fail, seeing as the end result of Aaron's deterioration resulted in needless violence. But the failure isn't as clear as in other scenarios that I've looked into. On one hand, he was reported multiple times to authorities about the disturbing things that he had been saying. He was placed into mental hospitals, was seeing therapists, psychologists, and psychiatrists, all leading up to the incident. And he was even prescribed medication that was said to have helped him. But on the other hand, who was watching him to make sure that he continued to take these meds? Why was he allowed to still have guns in the same property that he lived? And surely, some people must have seen signs of his drastic deterioration in the direct lead up to the shooting. People that could have said something or done something to alter the course of this. Like I said, it's all what-if scenarios and what could have beens. And these thoughts always tend to creep into my mind when I spend the time thinking about the many aspects of his life. But one cannot exist in the what-ifs of life. And this, unfortunately, is how this event played out. As a result, Aaron will now spend the rest of his time behind bars. Paul Lee's family are sentenced to grieve the loss of their loved one, and many others will face a lifetime of PTSD, trauma, and anxiety. When I think about Aaron spending his life behind bars, I don't get the same feeling that I do when I think of other violent criminals. Usually when my mind turns to others, I feel as though jail is a punishment. Their freedoms have been revoked, and they are now forced to abide by strict rules, alongside a parade of other people who all likely don't really feel like abiding by these rules. An environment that truly does seem like a punishment for the regular individual. Yet when I think of Aaron, I wonder to myself, quite possibly, given the circumstances, this is a place that he may actually feel like makes sense to him. It won't be as much punishment as it may be for others. There will be rigid structure, and things won't change. People won't take his bed away. Meals will be given at set times. The firm framework of prison life and schedule that can be torturous for some may make sense to Aaron and his OCD. The whole scenario may hold enough pillars of structure that will see him finding balance within his mind. The free world outside is unpredictable, confusing, and it moves so quickly that it's difficult for many people to grasp what's going on at the best of times. Prison could slow things down for the man, and ruling out the possibility of bullying, fights, and other inmates, this place could allow him the ability to clear his mind and see things from a different perspective. If this is the case, I can only hope that from here, he will be able to look at his decisions that he made on June 5th, 2014, and to see it from an angle of the ones he hurt, to view it in a way that allows him to truly understand what sort of chaos and horror that he had driven into the hearts of so many. Hopefully, it will make him face his actions and accept the consequences, rather than hiding behind a false barrier that this was all some sort of plan concocted by a higher being. Now I would like to think about the man whose life was taken, 19-year-old Paul Lee. When looking around online for information about Paul, I found report after report of friends who mourn his loss, people who say that he made them laugh constantly, and others who say that he inspired them through his passion for dance. His older brother Albert would mention that he misses his younger brother every night, as that's when they would most speak. Now that his younger brother is gone, the hole that is left sees him always wondering before he sleeps what his brother's life could have been. Albert recounts that his brother Paul was going to major in psychology because he was passionate about helping people, especially those who are struggling with mental illness. The very person who ended Paul's life would have been someone that he would have wanted to help. A quote from his brother. Sometimes we might have underestimated Paul's impact on the community. I think the hardest part is for us to not be able to tell him that, or to treat him that way, just to let him know how special he really was. That's something we'll never have the chance to do in person, but we know he's looking down on us smiling, like he always does." End quote. Paul's father, Peter Lee, would say that whenever he got upset or worried about something, Paul would be there for him. His son would come over and pat him on the back, and then say, "Appa, Appa, don't worry." Peter explains that Appa means dad in Korean, and that when he remembers back to those times, it does make him smile. One of Paul's classmates put forward an idea to build a memorial in his name at the school. It was not only approved, but quickly funded by the local community. The way it was designed was said to incorporate flow, to resemble movement as Paul loved dance. It would have an arbor that mimicked the curved wall below, and this would represent life itself. Then the wall would come to an abrupt end, representing Paul's death. The memorial would also be pointed north, in the direction of the location of Paul's final moments. Upon the request of his father, a bench was also incorporated into the design so that university students could sit and look over the campus to take a moment away from the often busy and stressful university life and to reflect on how precious everything is overall. Peter would also say that a big reason he wanted this bench to be built was so that Paul's mother, Mira, could go to it at times. There she could sit and think about her son's life. It's shocking to think that his life would come to an abrupt end so needlessly. Aaron claims that Paul disrespected him, but it was later learned that the boy had headphones in and didn't hear Aaron's commands. One moment he was listening to something and walking to meet with friends. Everything was normal. And then the next he found himself blindly, unsuspectingly stepping through the doorway that violently led to the end of his life. An end laced with pain and confusion. An officer testified that he desperately tried to resuscitate Paul using CPR, blood covering his hands and face as he frantically called for emergency medical over radio. A futile attempt to request for help, as the radio waves were chaotically maxing out due to the large amount of communication happening at the time. This officer, a voice lost in the sea of confusion, as he desperately watched Paul slip away from this world. I would like to take a moment to commend the actions of John Mayes that day. When the word hero comes to mind, I now will think of this man, not only because he disarmed a dangerous shooter and potentially saved countless lives, but because of his conduct throughout the process and afterwards. He openly admits that he was operating in the moment under complete panic and shock. He didn't dive headfirst into danger willingly. It was more a reaction to a set of events, and he was the passenger in his body. He doesn't glorify his motivations for the heroic moment, nor does he bask in praise that people give him for it. During his testimony, he did not attempt to oversell what he had done, nor does he seem to experience joy in his role in the events of that day. What seems present in his mind is the loss of life and injury caused by Aaron's actions. John reacted to that. He is aware that it was a reaction, and his heroic behavior does not overshadow the tragedy in his mind. There are no winners here, and this does not seem lost on him. Here is a quote from John that he gave in an interview following the incident. Quote, "Words cannot come close to expressing the tragedy that occurred this past week on our campus. Like everyone else, I would hear of these horrible events on the news, but go home knowing that it could never happen to us. On Thursday, my life changed. I was thrown into a life and death situation, and through God's grace I was able to stop the attacker and walk away unharmed. As I try to return to a normal life in the aftermath of this horrible event, I pray above all things for strength for the victims and their families. While my experience left me in physical shock, I know that many people are dealing with much greater grief than I have experienced, and in honesty, I probably would not be able to handle myself right now if I had personally known the victims. I know that I am being hailed as a hero, and as many people have suggested, I find this hard to accept. I am indeed a quiet and private individual. While I have imagined what it would be like to save a life, I never believed I would be put in such a situation. It touches me truly and deeply to read online that parents are telling their children about me and telling them that real heroes do exist. However, what I find most difficult about this situation is the devastating reality that a hero cannot come without tragedy. In the midst of this attention, we cannot ignore that a life was taken from us, ruthlessly, and without justification or cause. Others were badly injured, and many more will carry this event with them the rest of their lives. Nonetheless, I would encourage that hate be met with love." End quote. I've wondered many times how I would react in a high-pressure situation like this, as I'm sure many of you watching right now have as well. I would like to believe that I could be heroic, and I would like to imagine that I don't crumble under the weight of it all. But until one is faced with a scenario like this, one will never know. I may turn and run. I may cower in a corner, hoping for it all to end quickly. And if that is the case, that is okay as well. The average person like me isn't trained nor equipped to operate under that enormous stress and anxiety. But for John, an everyday person like you or I, he was faced with the scenario that many of us wonder about over and over, and he knows now how he reacted. His reaction, along with his modesty afterwards, is what makes him a hero in my eyes. To be a family member of a victim of this sort of crime, I think must be one of the most painful and confusing things one could experience. Albert said that he believes all things happen for a reason, and this experience of losing his brother has really challenged his beliefs there. I don't blame him in the slightest either. If this were one of my loved ones, someone whom I hold close to my heart, I think it would be many long years before I'd ever be able to come to terms with how and why something like this could have happened. The damage that one man's decisions caused is enormous, rippling through a community, traumatizing countless people. Thomas still has pellets lodged in his neck and face that can never be removed. Sarah came within inches of losing her life during surgery. It would be impossible for me to expand my thoughts to cover everyone involved here, so I will focus it down to Paul and his family. And what I would like to say is that I wish the family of Paul Lee, and to all of his friends, that I hope you are able to find peace surrounding this loss. If any of you are to hear these words, you have my deepest condolences for losing such a beautiful person in your life.